what you're saying actually starts to suggest that maybe you are talking about some kind of new genre, which you said. What you're saying, what she's saying, is suggesting that I think, in that you talk about horror as being boundless. I think is the way you use it. And if it's, I mean, I agree that it's a genre in the sense of forms and systems and mechanisms, but I also tend to agree that it's boundless in the same way that Sonnet would be boundless.
I am dealing really almost entirely from my own experience. I know very well that there are rules and or ideas that are supposed to be commonly found in horror stories. When I began, I kept those in mind. I had Henry James in mind, and Dracula or something, and eventually I had Stephen King in mind. And there was a certain amount of clarity. If you look at Ghost Story, it moves through a fairly well orchestrated series of events, leads up to a big climax, then a bigger climax. And when it trickles away to its end, there's a note of optimism and salvation, or at least survival. That's what we were supposed to do, I thought. Then, the more I kept going, I got kind of tired of writing books like that. And in order to stay alive, I had to stay interested. And so I wrote all kinds of things that had no supernatural content at all. They were like mystery novels, except that who did it was never really much important. What mattered was the way the trees looked on the lawn, and the way the deer looked when it came through the forest, and whatever it was that happened to your mother that made her spend all her whole life in bed weeping. Now, when those books were reviewed, I was very interested that 90% of the reviews in the first sentence called horror novels. And I thought, oh, well then, you can do any goddamn thing as long as it's approached from the right point of view. And clearly I could not escape being called a horror writer, nor after a point that I at all wanted, because I kind of enjoyed it. But that did not limit my take on things. Well, my take is what limited my take on things. It wasn't any imposition from without. I could follow my own little trail through the woods. And whatever I did was going to be called horror. And increasingly, it was about the recognition of loss, sorrow, confusion, grief. These emotions seem to me to be central to the human experience. Another centrality is a desperate yearning for that which you don't really want. Everything contains its opposite. This baffles us. Most of the time, we don't want to think about it. Light and things dark. Dark is the same as light in some sense, in emotional terms. Anyhow, when working toward this point of view, toward a series of life experiences, when I came out the other end, where I emerged where I am now, every word I write is called horror, and sometimes it looks as though it should be, and other times it doesn't, but it doesn't matter. So. But the emotional horror is pretty much the same. I'm not saying that it's despairing, though sometimes it is. But I think if human life is a journey from one darkness to another, through a darkness, that journey is at every step faced with a kind of ravishing beauty. And if you miss that part, you're in the soup.
I don't want to lose that. Okay. The idea of this goes back to enjoyment and perversity, which also I want to bring back. I want you to talk a little bit more about what you were saying. But being able to enjoy things that are outwardly or initially unpleasant. When you have a canker and you've got to bite it, or you chap lips or whatever, or that kind of pain, pleasure thing. But also you start to see beauty in things that most people automatically announce as ugly or monstrous. Yeah. That seems to be where the look of the trees, the way the deer is gazing, become important. What you're talking about with to get back to voyeurism, and this is point of view as well, You talk about, you like this kind of, to me what you described is sort of actually stepping out of humanity so that you can observe it and cackle at it or cry for it. And I suspect that's actually slightly extreme. There's some kind of mingling, and I'm just curious to hear you expand on that.
Well, I can explain it from kind of a personal point of view. My job, my day job, used to be covering crime, covering courts, and that job essentially consisted of seeing the worst of humanity every single week, and yet that is something. I mean, I wrote about it. People read it. I'm the arts columnist now. I can assure you, people read my crime stories much more. And that, I don't know if I hesitate to say stepping back and cackle, but there's a sort of Stephen King once wrote about how we kind of have a need to know about death, and I think that extends beyond to the bad things that are out there in the world that can happen to you, that can happen to people you know, and you're certain, and that is also very much an element of what I write as fiction. It's kind of I mentioned my short story, The Button Band, that was up for the Nebula last year, and that is a story that has a traditional monster in it, and there's a narrator, and the narrator is second person narrator. I imagine it as an internal monologue, and the big revelation at the end of the story is not so much the confrontation with the monster, although there is that, but there's a revelation that the narrator, you, is in fact a really horrible person, and dealing with the guilt of that. And I guess this ties a little bit with what Kathryn said, because then the confrontation with the monster becomes the gateway to his punishment. So there's the tradition coming in, but it is that twist that people really seem to hook into, and I would get reactions like the final third of this story is incredibly absorbing. I wanted to take a shower afterward, but that was a recommendation.
I'd like to follow this with that. You were a reporter.
Yes.
I was a reporter.
Yes.
And you look at things from the outside, and you never immerse in them. But I think you're reading that way. When you're talking about other people's work, you're reading like a reporter. I get into it. I was always a writer. I had the job for 5 years, and I covered juvenile court, and there was a lot of stuff. That's not the same as fiction.
Oh, sure.
It's external.
Well,
and I'm talking about reading things. You can't look at it and judge, say how well the writer did it. Maybe that's one kind of judgment. But judging what's going on in it, not so much.
Well, I think I've maybe given you the wrong impression. I mean, I totally agree with you that reading is a much more personal thing.
Yeah.
Than journalism.
So you're not look at those funny people. What you're doing essentially is, if you're not experiencing that, then either the writer isn't doing his job, or you as a reader are not in the work the way you should.
Sure, but I guess the point that I wanted to make was that the thing that actually appeals to me about this type of writing, and I think it's more than just me, and this is going to sound sort of terrible, but I think that type of writing that actually sort of makes you put your hand, into the burning furnace. I mean, you could take it out again, obviously, because it's a metaphorical experience, but it is an unpleasant experience, and yet people will appreciate it.